Hi fellas, it's me, GhostCritic. Another video. This is going to be 3 in 2 days. And well, this all kind of started with Deacon Howler. It kind of moved out to Howler Mouse. And currently, Custom Brown Star, he put his 2 pennies worth in, so I thought, hey, I guess it's my turn. Yeah, we've all been talking lately about comics and what have inspired us, how we grew up with them. When I saw Dakin Howlett's video, it did automatically think that would be a great kind of vlog to do. So I already had kind of ideas going on in my head, and then Howler Mouse just blew my mind with his half-an-hour epic, which just didn't feel like half an hour. It just was so interesting, and it was so, you know, felt honoured to listen to Tim's kind of history of himself and comic books, that, you know, it just went like that. I could, like I said on this video, I could have watched that for like another hour and not have noticed. But anyway, you guys over there across the Atlantic Ocean, a very different experience to obviously what us guys in the UK had when we were kind of growing up in the 70s, at least for me anyway. I guess from like the ages of like, well, the first 10 years of my life, so this is like the 70s, in the UK, if you were like between like the ages of, I guess, 1 and 10, you didn't really have that much to pick from in kind of the American side of the comics, and you were stuck with things like the Beano and the Dandy, Topper and Weezer, and these were just like slapstick, humorous, cartoony type comics. They were usually like maybe 2 or 3 pages of like a character or a bunch of characters, and they do something silly. It'd be a bit farcical. You certainly wouldn't get 2, 3, 4-part kind of stories, that's for sure. But this is what you were brought up on. I am aware of, or I was aware of, I should say, American comics at the time, because I do remember of an evening my father used to canvass the streets of Liverpool, where I was born, for a local political party, and because my mum worked at nights, I had to go along with Dad. Obviously couldn't be left home alone at the age that I was then, and so I used to have to traipse behind him while as he knocked on doors asking people who they were going to vote for. And to kind of sweeten the deal with me, we'd first go to this newsagents, and Dad would always give me the choice of a bag of sweets or a comic book. And there was in the corner, I remember, a spinning rack full of American comics. Unfortunately, at my age, I had much more of a sweet tooth than I did have the urge to get a comic book, so I always used to ask for the bag of sweets. Fortunately, Dad used to buy a comic as well for me, hide it in his pocket, and then when I go home, collapsing on the couch, on the sofa, he'd throw the comic book at me and go, there you go. So I knew of them, and I do remember there always being like Batman and Superman comics around. Now I don't know if it was Dad or Mum that bought these, and they were for themselves. I didn't particularly remember asking for them, so they must have been fans of comic books even back then. More about those comic books a bit later on. So of course I grew up and we moved away from Liverpool and we went up to the Lake District. And at the time, just before that, we moved around a lot, so there wasn't a chance to, you know, especially my belongings, to take much with me. So, you know, all my comics and stuff like that, for the most part, or at least the stuff that I couldn't carry myself, got thrown or left behind. So there isn't like a box hidden somewhere with, you know, hundreds of issues of something or other, unfortunately. So then we moved away and we settled down in the Lake District, and obviously we're talking like now from my year 10 onwards, and obviously my taste started to change. The Beano and the Dandy, the slapstick comedy, really wasn't my thing anymore. I was getting older, I was interested in different things now, and I guess my nerd credentials were already being developed back then, because like while all my friends were reading like football comics, like the lads were reading Royal Rovers and Shoot and stuff like that, and the girls were reading Lookin' and pop magazines, I was reading Eagle and 2000 AD, so you know, you've got Dan Dare and the Mekon, you know, Judge Dredd, Strontium Dogs, ABC Warriors, purely, you know, the kind of sci-fi driven stuff that I've always loved and always, you know, taken to my heart. So for a long time, that's all I ever read. I do remember, and this is kind of like what I remember the most really about the kind of American comics, even if they were UK reprints, but I remember having or going to my newsagents every week to pick up a UK reprint of Secret Wars. Now this was like an oversized comic book, and it had, you know, an issue of Secret Wars, and then there'd be a backup story behind it. I remember it being Power Pack for a lot of the time, and I just lapped this story up. It's one of the first kind of big comic books I can remember from American comics I can remember from my youth, and that newsagents, it caused me so much stress. You know, week after week they would lose my copy because I got them to put it aside for me each week, and so I knew I would I would get it, but they kept losing my issues week after week, and I'd have to wait another 2 or 3, 4 days to get it again. So that just used to drive me wild, and every time I came out of that newsagents, I was so distressed when I didn't have that next issue of Secret Wars in my hands. So kind of moving a bit along again, still got only really with British magazines, but I'm getting older, I'm getting into my teens now, and my tastes were maturing, and not long after, you know, still a big 2000 AD fan, but they started an offshoot of it for more mature readers, and that was called Crisis. And along with that, at that time, you had stuff like Deadline, Toxic, Revolver, and these are kind of like edgier, more hipper comics for, you know, like you said, a teen audience who wanted to, you know, their mind to be, you know, not educated, but, you know, entertained a bit more than just a few pages of, you know, slapstick humour. And there was multiple storylines and story arcs going through these. So yeah, the first kind of like up to my teenage years, really, this is all I had. Though, and this is when I was thinking about making this vlog, you know, a couple of things did come back to me, and there are 2 times that I remember, and now I remember them quite vividly. And there was this fish market, of all places, an indoor fish market, and in the corner right at the back there was a guy who sold comic books. Now they were all old comic books for that time, and he had hundreds and hundreds of American comics. Now, at that time, really wasn't getting much pocket money, didn't really have that much money from part-time jobs, so, you know, I went for that bargain sale bin, and I used to come out with, you know, 10 or 20 Marvel team-ups, and it would just be... No, it wasn't Marvel team-ups, no, in the fish market was, and this is kind of like going back to my eBay video, the first one I did about the House of Mystery, and I do remember being in that fish market with my dad, and I picked up all these House of Mystery, House of Secret kind of comics, and the guy who was about to sell me them kind of just looked up at my dad as if to say, is this okay? Like, obviously he thought these were going to scare the bejesus out of me, I don't know, but my dad was just like, they're comic books, what can possibly happen? I don't think I really had any nightmares from them, but I probably had some pretty freaky dreams at the time. Now, the Marvel team-ups came from a flea market that I used to go every Saturday in the neighbouring town, because I lived in this tiny little village. It was nothing. It really was. So I'd hop on a train, go down to this nearest town, and I would just go to this flea market. I went there purely just to go to this flea market, because I know this guy had a stall, and he did have all the new titles, but I wasn't interested. Again, it was a kind of a money thing. I could have bought 2 brand new comics, or I could go home with 20 really old comics, and they were, like I said, the Marvel team-up ones. So, and this is what happens with these comic books of mine. And this is one of the things, and Custom Brown Star said about it in his video, in that, you know, now we're collecting all these comics, it's because we're trying to, or at least, you know, as guys have said, it's trying to recapture what we had in our childhood. If we'd have known now what we did as a child with those comic books, we wouldn't have treated them half as badly. And certainly for me, I wouldn't have sold them back to the guy, or left them just hanging around. Certainly not, you know, for the dog to chew on, or, you know, the cat to use in its basket. Oh, don't. It makes me cringe now thinking what I had. So yeah, so now we're coming up to, like, leaving home, going to college, and I went to art college quite late, for me, at my age anyway. I was in my 20s, very early 20s. I couldn't have been more than 20 or 21, and I went to art college. And I'm not lying here, this was the first time I'd ever actually walked into a bona fide comic book store. There'd always just been market stalls, you know, in flea markets or the fish market, some guy in a corner selling them out of boxes. But this was a proper comic book store. It had shelves, you know, it had its own little, you know, shop. And one of the first comics I remember buying, and this is why I think it must have been 1990, 1991, and it was X-Force 1. Rob Liefeld, after the New Mutants had just finished, and he started off with X-Force, and I remember it being in a bag, a sealed bag, of course. Didn't know the worth of comics, you know, like I do now. Ripped it open to get at the comic, but that was probably one of the first comic books that I actually knew on the shelf, comic books that I ever bought. And of course, because I still wasn't really comic book savvy, he had all the lines of boxes, and there were more Marvel team-ups, so there I was, buying more and more Marvel team-ups. But again, it's kind of that, oh, if only I hadn't... Student life is expensive, as you can imagine, and your student grants and your scholarships or whatever, the money doesn't last very long. And so I did end up selling everything I ever owned just to get myself through college. So that was it. We're talking like, I don't know, 1993 now, maybe 92, 93. I've got no comic books at all. And it was a long time until I got back into them again, to be honest. From then on, kind of, it was music that was my passion, not playing it or anything like that, but just like collecting it, like vinyl, and eventually as it came into being, you know, CDs and stuff like that. And I'd forgotten all about comic books. And it wasn't really till I come to where I live now to go to college and another comic book store was here, and I, you know, walked past it, and thought, I'm going to go in. This is a good 4 or 5 years now down the line, and I went in, and it was what every person that is new to comic book feels like going into one. It's you that is the freak. They don't know you. They think you're some interloper, and they don't talk to you. They don't, certainly never recommended me anything. I mean, crikey, it must have been at least a year before I think anyone actually said more than 2 words to me, rather than hello and thank you, when I paid for my comic books. And I didn't have a clue what I was getting. And as anyone who'll still be watching when I'm going through my long box history videos, you'll see some crap that I've really bought over those years. So yeah, this became my comic book store, and eventually, I mean, I've been going there ever since now, and we're talking like 10 odd years down the line, and it's changed owner, and I must say the new owner is a lot better, a lot friendlier. He welcomes anyone into the shop now. The idea of going to a comic shop really isn't that daunting, I wouldn't have thought, for many new people, because we need new readers to keep this industry going. And then that day came, and it was the black day. Got myself in, you know, so much debt. It was scary, and it wasn't a nice time in my life. It really wasn't. And I had to really sit down and go, look, you're being stupid here. What would you rather do? Would you rather eat and be nourished and be healthy, or do you want to look at some bits of paper with some funny pictures on them? It was a no-brainer. But that day, walking into that comic book shop and telling the owner of the time, I said, I just looked at him and said, I'm really sorry, but yeah, I was apologising to him. I said to him, it's like, I'm really sorry, but you're going to have to cancel my pull list. And he was a little bit taken aback, and I was like, sorry mate, I just can't afford it anymore. I've got bills to pay. It's just not right that I'm buying all these comics. And he was really, really understanding, and we had a little chat about it all. And then for a good, well over a year, that was it again, me with comics. And through those years, getting myself out of debt, I started selling everything, my videos, all my music, but what never left, never went, were my comic books. That was, when I moved here where I'm now, I had many conversations with many people, and I said, I would sell anything in my house. I would sell my TV, I'd sell all my books, I'd sell my clothes, but I'm never going to get rid of my comic books. Not this time. and I never did. And in a way, I'm kind of proud. So eventually, here we are now, and I'm just enjoying comics more than I ever have, and being on here on YouTube is just fantastic as well. I never thought that, like, just over a year ago, when I started doing these vlogs, that, you know, I would have this kind of circle of friends, and you guys are my friends. You've been so cool with me, you know, and I'm not just talking about commenting on my videos and, you know, thumbing them up and stuff. You know, I've had messages coming backwards and forwards, you know, personal messages between a few of you guys. You know, I've been chatting to a couple of guys on Twitter as well. And it's just so nice to finally, because this is one of the things through all these years I've never really had, and that's someone to chat with about comics. No one else was really interested in it. They just think I'm a big huge geek, which I am. And there's nothing wrong with that. There really isn't. So I'm really glad to have this outlet now. It doesn't matter how far away you guys are, or how scarily close some of you may be. I don't know. But it's really nice being here. And I'm going to be around for a long time. You guys are the best. I'm not going to leave you. And I guess that's kind of a shortened kind of history of me and comics. I'm sure there's way more I could have said, but I better stop now. Take care. Enjoy.